Do you have fond memories of video gaming from when you were a kid or even from even the current day and age? I do. When I was 5 years old, I remember my dad took me to the local pizza parlor the day that my guinea pig died. He did this to enable me to feel a part of my family and know that my family loved me and there was plenty of quality time left to have in life, even after the loss of this wonderful first pet that I had. And one of the most vivid memories of that evening was playing the video game called Asteroids. This was back in the 1980s, and how enthralled I felt with the sense of wonder of exploring outer space and trying to protect my tiny little ship there in outer space from these giant boulders hurtling around me. And just how thrilling that was. And ever since then, I've loved video games a great deal. They brought a lot of quality to my life throughout my earlier years, brought me together with friends to play games, and also played games by myself and talked about them with friends afterward. And I think it really enriched my life for a long time. Later in life, I got busy and play games less often, but still enjoy them. Last night, I was just playing Pac-Man Party Royale on my iPhone and enjoy them a great deal and wish I had more time to play them. But there is controversy around video games in terms of, are they beneficial for health and mental health? And I've experienced these questions myself, thinking of my own life. So with us today, we have an episode about gaming and mental health. I'm Brandon Staglin, and this is One Mind Brainwaves. Video gaming is bigger than ever, a billion-dollar industry that rakes in more revenue than many other forms of popular entertainment. What are the mental and emotional health benefits of gaming? What are the concerns? Can it actually improve well-being? In a few minutes, we'll meet two members of the amazing team at Take This, the first nonprofit dedicated to fostering mental health among the gaming community. And some of their findings might surprise you. Later, we'll hear from our own team at One Mind Cyber Guide about an app that uses gameplay principles to actually foster mental health resilience in its users, and a non-biased review of this interesting app. But first, let's fire the retro rockets, fire up your flux capacitor, and let's start at the very beginning, 40 years back. We're going retro, heading back to the video game craze of the early 1980s, and the hit song that defined it all, Pac-Man Fever. Brought to you by the duo Buckner and Garcia. And it's a thrill to have one of them here with us on this very day. Jerry Buckner, the songwriter behind this song, joins us today. Jerry, thank you so much for being with us today, and welcome to Brainwaves.
Well, glad to be on the program. Thanks for having me. Boy, 40 years. That sounds so long ago, I guess.
Yeah, it feels like yesterday in some regards, though. I still fondly remember the song Pac-Man Fever and can recite some lyrics from it, which I won't do. I'll let you do that later in the show. Okay. But yeah, I still love that song. Yeah, your song was a pop culture sensation and it's beloved to this day. Tell us what led you and Gary to write it. How did Pac-Man Fever come to life back in 1981?
Well, the short story is Gary and I grew up together in Ohio, and we ended up in Atlanta, Georgia, because we were going to get into the music scene down here. And we were writers and performers. And we got into make a living. We got into doing jingles. And we were working at a studio in Marietta, Georgia, a little suburb of Atlanta. And we went to this restaurant to have a bite to eat one night. And there was a Pac-Man machine. This is the fall of 1981. And there's people playing it, and what's that? So we started playing it. Where we go, wow, this thing is great, So we ended up coming there every night and spending more time there. Spending more time there than we were in the studio working. So it came to the idea to us, maybe we should do something on this game to get some attention for our jingle business. And maybe we can get a radio station here in Atlanta to play it. And that was the original idea behind doing it. We never envisioned that this would be what it became to be. So that's how it started. And that's how we ended up recording it. And then, of course, once it was played on the air here in Atlanta, everything went crazy.
Fantastic. And it really blew up. It landed you a record deal that enables you to write songs about the iconic games Donkey Kong and Centipede and other famous games like that. Well, why do you think people feel such a strong affection for this particular song?
Well, I think it was a time, a big change for everybody with video games. We went from the Pong game, which was pretty simple, to this game, and this game was the first to really attract both males and females, and was constructed to be that way by the developer in Japan. But it was a fun game. It was a challenge. Everybody could play it. Some people were better at it than others, but and it was different. It was new, and it was fun. And then Pac-Man has just grown and grown and grown and grown over the years, is bigger now than ever. And it's a memory for people that sticks out in their minds. Like you say, you remember the lyrics, you remember the song. There's a lot of great songs over the years, a lot of great songs from '82, but ours stands out because of the association with the game. And also we try to write a good pop song. We didn't just want to throw sound effects and so forth. And I think that showed up in how we recorded the entire album, including Pac-Man. But I think it brings back those memories, and it was just a great time and a fun time for everybody. I can tell you real quick, about a year or so after our song was a hit, Casey Kasem was doing his letters that he would read on the air, and or dedications, long distance dedications. And he dedicated one, a girl wrote in saying, I met a guy at an arcade, back in '82, and, I don't know where he is, but I'm sending this dedication. And they played our song, and I thought, this is supposed to be loved, love dedication. So I guess that was a good example of the overall feeling that the song represented to everybody.
That's beautiful. And, I really like the idea and the experience of reminiscing, hearing songs that I love from a long time ago and what those times meant to me. And, your song does that for me in many ways. For a song that talks about having a fever, being driven crazy, going out of your mind, this song actually has done the opposite for many people. It brings back good memories and fosters well-being, as people have told you over the years. Can you tell us a bit about that and why you think it does that for people?
Well, the song it's touched areas that beyond belief, even in the religious field. We had a minister contact us from Cleveland that had a church up there, and they had done a sermon involving using Pac-Man and in their sermon, applying it to the scriptures, and asked if I could do a video and so forth, which I was happy to do. But it's been in the Rose Bowl parade. It's been in television, South Park. I mean, current shows, older shows. We've been crossword puzzles in New York Times. I mean, it's gone everywhere. And I think it's just comforting to people. Again, it brings up memories, but it's fun. I can't speak to all the games that are out now. I know some are pretty violent. I don't know. I can't speak to that, but I do know that the games we're talking about, like you say, they were fun, and it brings a little joy to people. And as I say, it works pretty much in any setting. I mean, look where we are today talking about it.
Yeah, here. I love the joy the games bring, even, all throughout the years of gaming that I've done. This year, as we said, marks the 40th anniversary. And as we said, wow, hard to believe it's been 40 years since Pac-Man debuted. But I understand you got the band back together last year during the pandemic to, of course, socially distance in a safe way to celebrate the anniversary. And you made a video, a new video with the song. How was that experience for you guys?
Crazy, pretty crazy. No, we thought some other groups had done that, so we thought we would do it too, and got all the original people back together, and had a gentleman put it all together for us. And so we did a video, and we featured all the people that played on the original record, and a book came out, Pac-Man Fever, about the story behind it, which we're talking about here. But we did the video because we thought maybe, it'd be fun for people to have something positive. So, yeah. So it's all the old guys playing.
Fantastic. And we're going to see it now. Congratulations on all the success of Pac-Man Fever. And let's enjoy it right now, everyone. Here we go.
Thank you.
And I'm headed to the arcade.
Jerry, thank you so much for your amazing song. We just love seeing it so much again. And thanks for all the work that you've done to bring joy to so many people.
Well, thank you. We're happy to be a part of it.
Absolutely. Thanks for being on Brainwaves. We're lucky to have you today.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, now to discuss the science and psychology behind the phenomenon of video gaming, we have two individuals from Take This, the first mental health nonprofit dedicated to fostering mental health in the gaming community. We have Dr. B. Raffael Boccamazzo, who is the clinical director for Take This. And we also have Dr. Rachel Kowert, the science director at Take This, who is also a science content creator for Psychgeist, which focuses on the science of gaming. Dr. Rachel and Dr. B, thanks so much for being with us today on Brainwaves.
Hello.
Hi, thanks for having us.
So great to have you guys. And it's been great getting to know you a little over the past couple of months. Viewers also, thank you so much for watching today. Really glad you could be with us. And if you have any questions during this episode, please feel free to post them in the chat for us or Dr. Rachel or Dr. B or Jerry. So Raphael, and Rachel have various questions for you guys, and excited to hear what you have to say. Raphael, I'll start with you, okay? All right. So, we talked about Pac-Man a minute ago, and that was one of the early iconic games. But gaming has evolved in so many ways since those early days of Pac-Man, when he was running around eating everything in sight. How has it changed, and why are so many people drawn to the experience of gaming?
I mean, how long do we have? It's there's so many reasons, and a lot of them are deeply personal. Just for me, there's a sense of accomplishment that goes along with games. They're designed. Actually, you know what? Even before I even go there, they're fun. They're just fun. I mean, I'm not gonna sit down and devote. I don't know, Rachel. How many hundreds of hours have you devoted to Stardew Valley? I'm probably
more than 100.
I'm probably at about 600 hours. But we're not going to play them if they're not fun. Ultimately, first and foremost, they add to our life. But I mean, for so many people, they offer a sense of mastery, of escape, of empowerment, of social connection, especially with the online games that we have today. People, and I know Rachel has lots to say on the power of games to bring social connection. But yeah, there's just an absolute myriad of reasons that people would want to engage in games, but ultimately they're fun.
That's so well said. Something in that single word, fun, and that just says it all. If we wanted to,
can I throw something in there? What he was saying, I remember reading a story about Groucho Marx, and all these people had tried to dissect their movies and figure out all this. And they asked him about it at one point, and he said, why were you successful? Because we were funny. And it's kind of what you were saying. The game was fun and very simple. Yeah.
There's a reason Duck Soup is a classic.
And it's so easy to forget how important fun is, in our lives, and so everyone works so hard, and so having that fun, I think, is just such a wonderful thing to have in your life. And I'm glad I can play games off and on when I have free time. Rachel, what does the science say? Now that we're getting into the serious part, what does the science say? Is gaming a useful tool to promote mental well-being and mental health? What can games teach us? What can the experience of playing games teach us about things like grief or anxiety or trauma or depression, and also about community and being together?
Community is such an important component. But what can it teach us, or is it good for our mental health? Yes, because fun is play and games are play, and play in and of itself is associated with a whole host of positive mental well-being outcomes: reduce stress, reduce depression, releasing of endorphins, increased creativity. And that's without even talking about the extra layer of social connection and reduce loneliness and experiencing a fun, playful activity with your friends 6 feet away from each other. as we've been doing for the last year. In terms of what it can teach us, I mean, there's been a whole host of games coming out, I would say, over the last 5-ish years, maybe even longer, that are specifically designed to teach us things about like depression, games like Sea of Solitude, or anxiety games like Celeste, or we talked about Stardew Valley, which was the initial winner of our Dr. Mark Award because it was a game that expressed mental health themes in accurate and hopeful ways. So games have really come a long way in terms of teaching us things about all these different aspects of mental health. But at like the most base level, it can be really great for, as I mentioned, a whole host of outcomes because they're playful and because they're fun.
Excellent. And they are so much fun. And, I've heard of other games like this one about psychosis being developed more recently. And there's actually games being developed. Pardon me?
Hellblade.
Yeah, Hellblade. Yeah.
Yes.
That's looks very, very exciting. And there's also
tough game to play.
Okay, in terms of like emotionally or just challenge of the skill.
Yes.
Okay.
No. Well, so that I may be preempting your answer here. We just get really excited because that is like the probably prototypical example people bring up when they talk about mental health representation in games. So, for viewers who may not be familiar with it, Hellblade is a third-person action game where an 8th century Pict woman descends into the underworld to save the soul of her lover, but she has extra abilities that they explore in a fairly culturally sensitive way, essentially symptoms of psychosis. And they developed all of this in conjunction with an entire team of viewers, consumers, people who had varying degrees of psychosis. And they did this. It was run by Dr. Paul Fletcher over at Cambridge, who's a neuroimaging psychiatrist expert on a lot of things and just a really funny guy.
Wow. Yeah, it's great to hear that detail. I actually talked to the developers while they were in the process of making the game. I had a couple of questions about what I thought about how they were representing psychosis. And so I felt really privileged to be able to contribute to that stage. But it's great to hear how the splash that the game is made and how accurate and realistic it is in terms of the mental health experience. And there's also games related to actually treating mental health conditions. I mean, some are being developed for that purpose, like Project Evo by Keeley Interactive, meant to treat ADHD or autism. And so it's great to see that coming out for that specific application getting for that purpose. And it's actually so much fun. I understand that they have to limit the amount of time people play the game by putting in like time limits of how long you can play it in the game. So it's the fun, I think, is contributing to the benefit as well. Mm-hmm. So today we're talking about gaming and mental health. And Raffael, games have become increasingly realistic and immersive. We were just talking about Hellblade as one of those examples. The prevalence of aggression, as Jerry was mentioning earlier, in some of these games, can they cause people to question the benefits? And I think some are concerned about violence in video games in our society. Is there a danger with some of the more violent action games that they might lead people to more aggressive behavior? Or conversely, are games more often a safe outlet for aggressive emotions?
Well, it's I know that Dr. Kowert has loads to say on this, but in the simplest terms, I'm going to point out that every time that there's been a new form of technology, there has been moral panic about it. There was moral panic about ragtime music. There was moral panic about pinball. There was moral panic about the printing press. There was moral panic about Dungeons and Dragons, Elvis, the Beatles, you name it. There is moral panic. Will someone think of the children? This one, we swear this time, is going to be the downfall of civilization. And thus far, civilization has endured pretty darn well. But even taking it out of the purely philosophical into practical numbers, since roughly 1994, video game sales have gone up. I'm going to get the math a little bit wrong on this one because I haven't looked at this in a bit, but I adjusted it for an inflation at one point, and the video game sales and revenue has gone up something like 700%, while in the United States, violent crime overall has gone down about 23 to 24%. And so if that's causal, if video games are supposed to be causing violence, we should see an equal uptick in violence, but in fact, it's gone down. So if that's your definition of cause, you have a very different definition of cause than I do.
No, I can tell you a story that happened with us. We were doing a show in New York on Nickelodeon, and they had brought a bunch of people in to talk about video games, and they included some people from the companies that had the games, some other people on television. They had us there to perform and do our song. And there was a group, 2 or 3 ladies representing some group that they had, again, anti-video games. You know, they were anti, you know, and they were getting a lot of camera time. And so we're sitting there, and they get into an argument with the Nintendo people, and Gary and I are kind of, okay, we're sitting over here. Well, everything calms down a little bit, and you know, we're in the green room, and the one lady I'm sitting next to, she looks at me and she says, "Are you the guys that did that Pac-Man Fever record?" And you know, I said, "Yeah." And she said, "You know, my daughter loves that song. Can I get your autograph?" And she pulls stuff out and then promptly walks out on national television to say how anti-games, you know. And I remember thinking, craziness. You know?
Okay.
Oh, goodness.
Wow.
Well, let me just chime in just with a little science tidbit. In terms of the cause and effect, like Dr. B was saying, we've done more studies on the effects of violent video games on aggression and violence than any other topic in game studies over the last 20-ish plus years. And not a single study has found a direct causal link. So there are links between playing violent video games and increased aggression, very mild, immediately following gameplay, but there's no evidence to suggest that translates into real world behavior. So it does seem to be fueled by moral panic far more than it's fueled by actual science.
Oh, hey, Rachel.
Yes.
Hey, Rachel. Tell them about the hot sauce.
Tell them about the hot sauce.
Tell them about the hot sauce.
Yeah.
When we do these studies about violent video games, we have different measures of aggression that we use in the lab. Some of them are fill in the blank tasks. So you come in and you see a piece of paper that says KI blank blank, and you fill in the word kiss. Then you play 15 minutes of a violent game. You come back to the same task, and instead of kiss, you put kill, and that's considered an increase in aggression. Another method that's used is the hot sauce paradigm, which is you go in, there's a stranger next to you. They say, he hates hot sauce. How much hot sauce? I got the spiciest hot sauce. How much do you want to give him? And you're like, well, not really. I don't want to give him any. That's kind of mean. They're like, okay. And then you play 15 minutes of a violent game, and then they ask you again. And then you're like, give them a cup of hot sauce. And this increase in the hot sauce, it's called the hot sauce paradigm, is considered an increase in aggression, which is why a lot of this research it makes you laugh, but this is literally how they're measuring it. And then they say this becomes the headline, increase in aggression because you played violent video games. So the links are tenuous.
So essentially, because this is the science here, that because, you know, I put more hot sauce in the spoon to give to the stranger, I'm going to be a violent criminal 10 years down the line.
Right.
Have they tracked a tremendous increase in hot sauce related crimes over the years that video games have been active?
Yeah.
That would be a fun, if there's any PhD students out there who would like to do that dissertation.
You could do that one.
Okay. And Rachel, you know, as long as we're on the topic of controversy of video games and concerns that some people have, there are always concerns about the impact of too much screen time in general and about digital games specifically. Is there such thing as gaming disorder? What would that be, and how widespread is it?
Yeah, so gaming disorder is an official diagnosis recognized by the World Health Organization, but it is not officially recognized by the American Psychiatric Association. It's in the back of their diagnostic manual as something that requires future research. You know, the short version of it is it's highly debated in the community of scholars. Generally speaking, there's far less support for a diagnosis because there's no evidence to suggest that games are inherently addicting. And by cataloging it as a specific addiction, you're really bypassing other potential addictions that have decades of research and treatment programs, things like sex addiction or work addiction, shopping addiction. None of these are either formally recognized by the APA. So it does seem to be mostly fueled, again, by moral panic. Now, that said, some people use games maladaptively. Absolutely, there's no question. It just seems much more likely that this is being driven by something else underlying, increased environmental stress, depression, anxiety, something else, than like the game itself driving an addiction, quote unquote.
Makes sense.
to jump in on that, one of the things that, so I don't work with people directly anymore. I just do policy and education these days. But back in the days when I did work with folks, one of the things I would explain really frequently is there's a significant difference between the way professionals and researchers use a certain term and the way the general public uses a certain term. Like when parents would, bring their kids and they would talk about how they were, quote, addicted to a video game, what they were saying to me is that there was a child who was engaged, or a teenager who was engaged in an intense, repetitive pattern of behavior. But that's not necessarily driven by an addiction, because there are tons of reasons people can engage in repetitive, intense patterns of behavior. I mean, obsessive compulsive disorder comes immediately to mind. Folks with ADHD and autism. I'm autistic. I can hyper focus with the best of them. I have lost whole days to certain things. I mean, Rachel can speak to this, that at conventions, when we go to conventions, people are giving feeding and watering instructions for me because I will literally forget to eat because I can't tell that I'm hungry. And so there are so many reasons people will engage in these intense, repetitive patterns of behavior that have nothing to do with addiction in the technical sense of the word.
That's a really amazing, important thing to remember, that there are many causes for different types of behavior. And, gaming, because it is pleasurable, may be something that people engage in, repetitively. And if they have other underlying conditions, it may, tap those predilections and develop into something different that way. So this is fascinating. Today we're talking with two experts in the field of gaming and mental health, and about the effects of video gaming on mental health. We have with us two individuals who lead the Take This organization. We have Dr. B. Raffael Boccamazzo, who is the clinical director, and we have the research director, Dr. Rachel Kowert. We're very lucky to have them. Viewers, if you have any questions for our guest today, or if you have anything you'd like to share about your own experiences in gaming, perhaps related to mental health, perhaps not, please feel free to post this in the chat for our talk today. And if you'd like to share the information that our guests are sharing today with anyone you think it might benefit them, please do so. We'd like to have this information spread far and wide. And thanks again for being with us today. So, Rachel, you recently posted a research review showing how live streams on Twitch may help viewers cope with difficult periods in life. What were your findings there?
Yeah, that was a great study. So as you mentioned, I have a YouTube channel, and once a month I review recent research in the area. And the one this month was how people are using Twitch to help cope with difficult periods in their life, specifically related to the mental health stresses associated with COVID-19. And I think what the most interesting finding that came out of that was people aren't watching Twitch just for distraction or entertainment, which I think a lot of people think they do, but for the social community associated with it. And this goes back to the social benefits of games. I mean, games are social when you play online. Games are social when it's a single player game. I talk a lot too in many of my YouTube videos about Animal Crossing and how it's a one player game, but it is a very social experience because of the way that the game is created and the other characters in the game. Well, Twitch is the same. Having a live stream on your TV passively, knowing that there are actual people there right now live, seems to provide a sense of social comfort, especially when people are feeling increased depression or increased anxiety.
That's great. So it's like people feel like they're participating in something that's wider than just where they are right there. And it's about a topic that interests them, something that they love, and they have that commonality with the people on the show, right? And so I think they can identify.
Yeah, exactly. And they even said specifically it had a better effect or a more meaningful effect to them than watching a YouTube video, for instance, because they knew it was live and that it was, part of that community.
Wow. That's fantastic. That actually helps people that way. And Raphael, I got a similar question for you. How has the usage of platforms like Twitch and of gaming platforms in general, has it increased during the pandemic? And has that helped people cope with the mental health stress of the pandemic?
Well, sure. I mean, what home-based activities haven't increased during the pandemic? I think you'd be hard pressed to find one. But the truth is that streaming platforms like Twitch have been increasing even before the pandemic. I mean, they've just been exploding. There's a reason Amazon shelled out, I believe, $1 billion 5-6 years ago to purchase Twitch. It was a good investment on their part. Some of the top tier streamers are making, in a couple of cases, 6 figures a month. I mean, it is a wildly popular platform, but it's not the only game in town. Basically, any interactive form of media has seen really an uptick, at least as best I know, during the pandemic. But yeah, has it helped people cope with the mental health stresses of the last year? Absolutely. Especially stuff that offers that sense of social connectivity that, Rachel mentioned. We've all been lacking it in so many ways, and our sense of normalcy has been just blown out the window. And so doing what we can to create that sense of normalcy from home, that sense of connection, whether it's team-based activities like I can't tell you how many friends I never thought would play a first-person shooter are into the game Destiny 2 right now. And they're just getting really excited about the team raids that are going on. The friends of mine who have not played World of Warcraft for years, they're getting the band back together. They are bringing in their old guild, and they're doing new raids. This has been a really interesting year in terms of seeing people's resilience and creativity in how to find social connection when the stuff they take for granted has been taken away.
This is fascinating. It builds community, but does it also build things like creative thinking? I'm really curious about this because I remember reading a study when I was an anthropology major in college about how engaging in fantastical thinking and, say reading fantastical literature or playing games, it wasn't about that, but I think it could translate to that too, helps people think in ways that are not so based in everyday reality, but maybe beneficial for them or at least interesting to contemplate and entertaining at the very least. What do you think?
I mean, probably. I mean, there's so many games that involve it. Okay, yeah, I'm gonna. I really should. I can just let the researcher answer this one.
It does. It's associated with creative thinking because it's what Dr. was going to say, because of flexible thinking and exactly what you were saying, Brandon. Because you solve a lot of puzzles in new and novel ways. You're in different environments that you don't experience in the real world. It's been associated with increased creative thinking because of increased flexible thinking.
Interesting. Yeah. We actually have a scientist who works with us here at One Mind. His name is Dr. Alec Widge, and he's developing a neurostimulatory platform to increase flexible thinking in people who that's a challenge for. People, for example, who may experience schizophrenia or depression or post-traumatic stress, and help them with the pathology of those conditions. But maybe gaming could be combined with that or an alternative to that.
Yeah. I mean, there's certainly games out there that I would like to see studies done on in terms of specific benefits they do. One of my absolute favorites is actually that skateboard right over there called Death Squared, which is a really morbid name for such a hilarious game. It's so cartoony and wonderful. And what's unique about this particular game, it's a puzzle game with some really wonderfully hilarious voice acting, where you have to simultaneously, if you're playing in single player mode, move 2 cubes around a screen in tandem, one with your left thumb, one with your right thumb, at the same time, in order to solve a puzzle and not destroy the other cube. Because if you move one of them with poor timing, the other one gets destroyed. I would love to see some research done on interhemispherical neuroplasticity on that one, neuronal generativity. It just seems like such a great game given the bilateral activation that's going on there. I would love to see some people do some stuff with that.
I'd like to ask Rachel a question, if I might.
Yeah, please.
Her opinion, we just had this mass killing and so forth. And many of these things that occur, they try to say that a lot of these people are playing video games. And sometimes right before they go out and commit these crimes. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, the research shows, that video games often get blamed following mass shootings, but saying that they played video games is really like saying they wear shoes because it's so ubiquitous. It's more than 90% of all people in the United States, for instance, play video games. Globally, more than a billion people play video games, but these mass shootings seem to really be centralized in the United States. So it seems much more likely that it is other cultural and demographic factors. And there's a lot of work from Chris Ferguson, who's looked at this, who's looked at the impact of video games, for instance, on violent crime and compared it to other things like frustration tolerance or peer delinquency or previous exposure to violence. And all of these demographic factors are far, far, far more influential on whether somebody is going to commit a violent crime than any consumption of media, whether it's violent video games, violent movies, music of any particular variety in which you want to blame it on, rock and roll or whatever. So it's just an easy scapegoat to a complex problem is really what it is.
Is that all the stuff that was in Moral Panic?
This is the classic Moral Panic.
No, sorry, Moral Combat. I was talking about Ferguson's Markey's book.
Yes, there's a great book called Moral Combat. Moral Combat. I always want to say Mortal Kombat.
So do I.
I know. Moral Combat by Patrick Markey and Chris Ferguson, which specifically talks about the culture of panic that we have around games, specifically as a scapegoat for violent crime. So it makes a good headline, and I can see why people go to it because it seems like, they're cause and effect, right? They're emulating some kind of violent behavior, and then they are doing it in the real world. But our brains are really good at differentiating between what is real and what is not. And there's no scientific evidence. As I mentioned before, we've done so many studies and put so much money into looking into it. And there's been not a single link between playing violent video games and committing violent crime. But thank you for bringing that up because it continues to be what the discourse when these kinds of horrible, horrible things happen. Thanks
for enlightening us there. But there is the question of perhaps children, and I think children have a greater capacity for make believe, and perhaps possibly not as developed capacity for judging what's real and what's not, and especially very young children. What can parents do to monitor their kids' gaming to make sure their play is age appropriate and healthy?
Yeah, I mean, in regards of the game still influencing our behavior directly, it's still even in children. There's no evidence of that. I think that parents obviously need to take an active role in making sure their kids' gaming is both age appropriate. And we talked about screen time earlier, like time appropriate. Look over their shoulder, ask them what they're playing. Actually, read the ESRB age rating and the content labels. I mean, I remember back in the before times when you would go into a store to buy a game. I would see 8-year-olds grabbing, M for mature games and the parents just buying it for them. It's like, look at the cartridge and make sure this is content that you want your child to be consuming. That's really, I think, number one. What do you have something to add, Dr. B?
Well, I'm going to parrot something you have said so many times that this is your children's social world. Okay. And it has just as much validity. Like if you think about some of the social games they're playing, think of it like a team sport. Okay. You going in as a parent and pulling the plug when they're in the middle of a raid is like you walking onto the football field and pulling your kid directly out of football practice. And so there's an important thing to be considered here is you wouldn't drop them off at a party probably without meeting some of their friends. Same thing here. Like Dr. Kowert said, ask them about their friends, ask them about their games, play the games with them. You don't have to like them, but you do need to understand them.
Yeah.
Know what your kids are doing. Pay attention to the ratings. You wouldn't send an 8-year-old to a rated R movie, but if you're buying a rated M for a mature game, that's essentially what you're doing.
Yeah.
Wow. That's great advice. And I like what you said about playing games with your kids. I think there's a whole, benefit to that as well. Playing together as a family. Maybe some games are better suited for that. Like multiple age ranges would be interested in them. Different types of games. Like you mentioned Animal Crossing earlier. Seems like one of those examples.
We've got a whole list.
Yeah.
Oh, Death Squared is so much fun. Especially if you play in multiplayer mode, because then you. I like to think about these in terms of social emotional learning goals. And Death Squared, if you play it in the multiplayer mode, involves synchronous communication skills, divergent and convergent thinking skills, frustration tolerance, lots of frustration tolerance. And you have to communicate as a team to navigate through. It's a wonderful game for that. Some of the other ones that we've mentioned recently. Oh God, and I'm totally blanking.
Overcooked.
Overcooked. But I was thinking, Among Us. I was like, God, we know the community manager. Oh God, Among Us, which is a social deduction and bluffing game. And you want to talk about a game that will, in a cartoony sort of murderous way, teach you behavioral emotional regulation skills as you have to bluff your way and not be caught as the person who's the imposter amongst the space crew. There are so many games that teach these things in subtle and really fun ways.
Sounds awesome. And it's so like it'd be so much fun to play these games. I got to look into these. Thank you. So speaking of fun, let's finish with the most fun part of the show. It's all been fun, but we hope this is the most fun part of the show. The lightning round. So we have 5 questions for each of you. First, Rachel, and then Dr. B, and then Jerry, if you're willing to do this too, Jerry. We want, for these 5 questions, really quick answers. And so that for each of you, it takes 30 seconds in total to answer the questions. Okay. So Rachel first, and then Dr. B, and then Jerry. I'll start with you, Rachel. First 5 questions for you. What type of music or video game do you turn to when you're feeling down?
Green Day.
There's no limit for me. Depends on what type of sad. Sometimes it's Tom Waits. Sometimes it's the Beatles.
Jerry?
Solitaire.
Love it.
Nice.
Okay.
Nice.
I don't play many video games. I like solitaire.
Fantastic. What hobby or activity besides gaming do you like to turn to for de-stressing or unwinding?
Dancing in the kitchen.
Cooking in the kitchen.
And collecting antiques. I love to collect antiques.
Oh, nice.
Okay. Favorite game of all time?
Final Fantasy VI.
Skyrim.
At risk of getting in trouble, I really loved Asteroids.
Yeah. Okay.
Good choice.
Yeah, I love
No
Asteroids
judgment.
too.
No.
Don't tell anybody I said that.
What is the most admirable trait for a superhero or superheroine?
Persistence.
The ability to live with the complications of making the right decision.
I'd say compassion.
Love it. I love it. What gives you hope?
Having these conversations.
Watching other people's resilience.
My faith.
Profound. Thanks so much, you guys. It's just been such a treat to talk with all 3 of you today. And viewers, thank you for watching as well. Now, please stick around for a minute because we have from our One Mind Cyber Guide team a rating and review of an app that uses gameplay principles for developing resilience and mentally healthy characteristics in its users. Take it away, Cyber Guide team.
Hi there, I'm Martha Neary, and I'm the project manager of One Mind Cyber Guide. You probably already use your phone for many things throughout the day, but did you know that there are lots of apps out there to help you manage your mental health and well-being? There are thousands of mental health apps available for download today. With so many to choose from, it can be hard to separate the good from the bad. That's where One Mind Cyber Guide can help. At One Mind Cyber Guide, we review apps on 3 different metrics: credibility, user experience, and transparency. We've reviewed over 200 products, and all of these reviews are available for free on our app guide at onemindcyberguide.org.
Hi, I'm Steven Schuler, and I'm the Executive Director of One Mind Cyber Guide. I'm a clinical psychologist and mental health service researcher, and my research focuses on the use of technology to increase access to mental health care. The work we do at One Mind Cyber Guide is important because there's a need for objective, third-party reviews of mental health apps and rigorous evaluation of their evidence base. In the coming year, we'll be featuring apps here on Brainwaves, which may be helpful for viewers.
SuperBetter invites users to track and achieve their goals and build resilience through completing challenges and quests. When users open the app, they can select from a range of power packs, all focusing on a different component of mental resilience or epic wins. Each power pack contains customized quests, power-ups, and bad guys. Quests are daily or weekly goals. When you complete activities, you'll earn resilience points. Power-ups are quick, feel-good activities to complete. Bad guys are obstacles to overcome, with tips on how to battle them. After battling bad guys, the app will also ask you a series of questions about how it went. Users can connect with friends in the Allies section, who can then share rewards and suggest activities. Science cards explain the evidence base behind every component of SuperBetter. We've reviewed SuperBetter at One Mind Cyber Guide, and it scores highly on our credibility scale, scoring 4.67 out of 5, and on our user experience scales, scoring 4.39 out of 5. It also has acceptable transparency around data security and privacy. You can learn more about SuperBetter on our app guide at cyber.guide/SuperBetter. We look forward to seeing you next week for another app review.
All right. Thanks, Cyber Guy team. And viewers, thank you too. And thank you to Dr. Rachel Kowert, Dr. Raffael Boccamazzo, Dr. B, and Jerry Buckner for being with us today on One Mind Brainwaves. It's been so great to talk with you. Thank you, guys. And viewers, thank you too. Don't forget, you can post questions on onemind.org/brainwaves and see all of our back episodes there. That's at onemind.org/brainwaves. Thanks so much. Bye, everyone. I'll see you next week. Take care.
Every day trying to find the strength. I just want things to go back to normal.
Science is racing to find treatments for the virus. Vaccines are on the horizon.
I don't know what to do.
But what about the mental health research needed to sustain our lives during and after the crisis? One Mind is funding the science to revolutionize treatments and provide hope. One Mind, accelerating brain health for all. Help us fund new treatments at onemind.org.